technical areas. So the plant rooms, the importantly the power areas. And what we want to do is not look at this as being this particular project, because it's more about understanding what's in a generator room, what's in a transformer room, what's in an air conditioning room. And obviously, by understanding the sort of kit that's in there, and when you see what we're looking at here, it's considerable, isn't it, Barry?
It is. It's like a little mini factory. I mean, we'll have a look at an image in a minute when I start sharing the screen. But data centers have become if not already, are going to become a standard piece of construction. We have in order to meet the demands of AI and other things, there are two big things. One, data center, but the other is energy production, because they all consume vast amounts of electricity for all sorts of reasons. And quite often the data center is built in an area of energy security to make sure it's, places like Sheffield and the Nottingham Valley, a lot of data centers were built there originally because of the local power station infrastructure. But what we do have is a mixture of data centers which are now 20 years old or older. And in this particular case, this one was built 38 years ago. All right, it's a former, well, I'm not to out of term because it's pretty obvious where it is if you know the industry, but it was the old Lloyds Bank or Halifax Building Society, and then the Lloyds Bank building, and now it's being refurbished and brought up to date with different services that are required for the data center mechanics that are needed today. Things change, different blades, different cooling systems, different ventilation, and also to do things with fire security and things like that. Things that were built 20 years ago, there's now different regulations to do with compartmentalization and things like that that are impacting. So this is a really useful example because it takes us from, it mixes new construction, old construction, asset management. And I think what is going to happen with this data center is some bits are going to be kept and some are going to have to be replaced because some of the kit's obsolete and they can't get spare parts for it. And this is the whole point of asset management is if you're doing asset management, you're trying to prolong the life of the asset and maximize its use and revenue and capability for as long as possible. And sometimes there's decisions to be made like, well, we can't find the spare parts for this particular machine. Is it worth us cannibalizing stuff, or what are we going to do? And it's like, well, we need to take this out and replace it with something newer, particularly to do with energy conservation. If you've got a generator or something that reduces at a lower and consumes less electricity, then obviously that's going to be hugely important. So this is a really interesting exercise to look at asset management, historical, and then assessment of the capabilities of a system, which needs, you're going to have product descriptions, you're going to have to be able to identify the machine in the first place, because quite often, the new owner doesn't know exactly what that manufacturer was, and that manufacturer may not even exist now if it's 30 years old. So it's a great exercise for getting data so you can make good decisions in the future. And because it's in this transition, there are certain areas that the security isn't an issue because they're going to rip everything out. So it doesn't really matter and put new things in. What we probably won't be able to do is share it when it's new, because data centers are, as George said, are like Fort Knox. They are absolutely obsessed with security for obvious reasons. So this gives us an interesting opportunity to look at how asset management can be used for brownfield sites and also new build. And it's another example of a project that's real and live and that we can look and share about. But I'll share my screen now.
Barry, could I just say, you carry on and do that. I was just going to say, one of the interesting things with this is that the team that are actually doing the maintenance there, some of them have been there for over 30 years.
Yeah, exactly.
So the knowledge that's in those people's heads is amazingly valuable. And because they're moving the operation, it's, that those people may well take retirement or whatever. So all of that knowledge is going to get lost. So what we're doing is using this to be able to allow them to transfer that knowledge onto maybe some colleagues or new people.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing. I mean, one of the things I've been doing for a number of years now is working in the nuclear industry, where we've been using 360 imagery to map what they call the tacit knowledge that's held in an organization. So tacit knowledge is all the stuff that's not documented. You know, who's the best person to get this purchase order sorted? You know, things that aren't, you know, the simple things like that are all about the efficiency. And what we've done in the nuclear industry is the average age of a worker in the nuclear industry is 58. So there's a whole generation of people who will be looking after nuclear power stations, and that includes the decommissioning of them, who are brand new and don't know the stories and literally where the bodies are buried, probably. So what we've done in the nuclear industry is use 360 as a way of harvesting that knowledge. If I said to someone who's retiring, for example, tell me all the things you know about this panel or that, then they'd look blankly. But using a 360 tour like this, it reminds people, it's a trigger. And what we can do with this is we can attach notes, drawings, stories, videos to this sort of 360. But can you all see a blue panel on here?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is I just got two images to share with you, just to show you can see what is in a data center and how this all works. We are not. There are two types of 360 imagery you can get, really. You can get the fast one, or you can get the more detailed one, and these are more detailed ones. Because when we're doing asset inspection, you have to have a pretty good camera so you can actually use it for asset inspection. I mean, I've got a blue cabinet here, but I don't know what that is. But if you take the right image, what I can do, zoom in, keep going. I'll just move it around a bit. So this is, you can do this on a website and stuff as well, but I've got it on my hard drive at the moment. But I can zoom in and I can actually start reading the instructions. Okay, so what this type of 360 image allows us to do is, well, I'll zoom out as well, otherwise we'll get a bit bored with this. But I can zoom in and read labels. I can read barcodes. I can read all sorts of things. Now, for somebody coming in and doing an asset inspection or buying something or taking over something, which is what happens an awful lot of time, just simple things like being able to read a dial or read a label so you can see who made the machine or things like that is really important. Now, this image takes about 30 seconds to capture on site. But if I zoom out as well, you can see the sort of thing. But you can see the level of complexity that we've got. And this is the plant room for the data center I'm going to show you in a minute. This plant room is about 80 meters long. It's on 3 floors. This is just a mezzanine floor. It's on 3 levels, and it's quite complicated, obviously, because you've got 3 major types of supply that they need. First off, there's electricity and distribution, taking things in from the grid, transforming them into a voltage that is usable, and then distributing that out. You've also got the emergency power supplies, which is a whole set of generators. In this particular thing, I think they've got 6 gen sets, which will kick in if there's a power outage or whatever. So it's got an uninterruptible power supply. So the emergency power supply is really important to maintain that, because that's critical to data centers uptime. Yeah, data centers are normally categorized by their uptime and downtime. So they're looking at 99.98% uptime in order to, and then that's how they sell the services. But the other services that they need is, because there's so many, well, if you've ever sat with a laptop on your knee, you know just how much heat can be generated with them. So there's a massive chilling system. And so that uses cooling towers on the roof, chilled water pumped right throughout the place. So, and the chiller units are, and this is a chiller unit, actually, this blue thing. There's about 12 of them in this plant room. And then there's the AC, just the heating and stuff. And then, of course, there's the cable infrastructure that links all the data center bits and paraphernalia, all the blades, assemblies, and different things. So people look at a data center and think it's just a lot of things spinning around, but actually in this case you've got a very substantial plant room associated with maintaining it and keeping it going 24/7. They have a maintenance site, even though it's not being used at the moment. They've got a full-time 24-hour maintenance team just sat there. Well, not just sat there, they're doing a great job in keeping everything spick and span and clean and stuff. I mean, a lot of it looks like it was put in yesterday, but a lot of this kit is 35 years old. The issue really is for the new owner is what's there. I mean, you can see, for example, if I'll just zoom in here. If you use the right camera and the right 360 image, so here's a list of all the valves made by a company called Rotary. So these is all extremely valuable information that you can use to do your asset list and compile the assets and then make decisions about it. I'll just get out of this one and I'll open up another one.
They're upgrading the power from, it's 8 megawatts at the moment, but the plan is to go to 200 megawatts, which is a drastic, significant increase.
Yeah.
And what they're also doing, sorry, Barry, what they're also doing is that they're looking to bring in new types of cooling. And what we're doing is, and what they're doing, they're going to be bringing in liquid immersive cooling as a way of addressing that cooling side of things.
Yeah.
Sorry,
okay. So, no, that's fine. I was just. So, can you see a data hall?
Data halls.
Okay. Right. So this is what a data center hall looks like. Normally, it's full of these racks and stuff like this, and it doesn't look very exciting. But of course, there's lots and lots of assets in here that need to be inspected as well. And most of them are in the roofs, in the structures over here, because this is where the power supplies come in. This is where all the cables that connect all these things. I mean, it's just a rat's nest of, if you have trouble with your cables at the back of your computer right now, you've no idea. Just managing the cables in this place is just incredibly difficult. Now, what they're going to do with this, I really don't know. Are they going to take it all out and put something new in? Well, the problem is that they need to make decisions like that. And that's what an asset information or a 360 tour like this will do. And again, what I've done here is I've taken about 10 images inside this. And of course, I can zoom in again and you can see the level of detail you can get. Okay, but of course over here it starts getting a bit blurry, so you have to go a bit closer to get the level of definition. But this is something you can put on a website and you can tour around, and then you can populate it. And obviously, you know, there are softwares out there which will allow you to use the 360 as a way of putting the assets into context.
What type of software is that, Barry?
Oh, I don't know, George. You tell me. Okay. All right. So obviously that we're using this, and I've probably taken over 300 photographs inside the data center, inside the warehouse, outside the building as well. So there's a complete visual tour. I haven't used point clouds or scanned it because they don't tell you anything. They tell you the shape, but they don't show you. You can't zoom into this level of detail with that. But what we've now got is a way of sharing information that can be shared again through people who are not CAD pilots. They don't have to be a Revit modeler. They don't have to import things. Anyone can do this. And also, one of the interesting things that people are starting to use this for is sharing this with supply chains, putting this sort of thing into a tender document so potential suppliers can look and see what is the condition of things and make more suggestions. Problem with data centers is they don't like people going in them from outside. And they really want to control the information. So you can put little, you know, you can give people access to a limited part of it, and they don't have to walk through the building and see where all the security cameras are. Security is a really big issue. And just another story about the nuclear industry. I've done this for several nuclear plants, and one of the funniest things I had was when the IT security people came to me and said, "Look, this is great, we love it, but it's showing all the CCTV cameras, and we don't want anyone in the business to see CCTV cameras." So they asked me to blur out all the CCTV cameras, which is great because all that happened is just, well, what's behind that blurred image? It's got to be a CCTV. Okay. But the other more interesting, the funniest part of it is in the nuclear industry, they normally have duplicates of everything. No, I'll stop sharing now because you've seen that. They normally have duplicates of plant that's critical. If something fails, they need a backup. But sometimes they can't have that. And so they only have one, and that's called criticality plant. And so if you were a terrorist or something, you wanted to put a bomb in a nuclear power, what you're going to do, you're going to go for the criticality plant, aren't you? Okay, but what they do there is they paint them all bright pink, so everyone knows they're critical. So when you're looking at a 360 tour, if you're a ne'er-do-well, you just look for anything that's pink and put your bomb against that. So I had to go in and recolor everything in Photoshop and make all the stuff that was pink not pink. Okay, now that's a sort of issue that you get when you start when you start mixing this sort of stuff into other disciplines. This is the sort of weird stuff that comes back to you. I loved it because they got to pay me more money for photoshopping all the pink stuff. But anyway, that's another story. But it points out that sometimes these things can have they can be a counterintuitive. You get many benefits, but at some point someone's going to go, "Oh, well, is this too much information?" But anyway, yeah. So what we've got here is we've got a tour. We can make bits available for people if they want to practice, if they want to see, if they want to use this as a test bed as well. We can't give you access to all the data center, obviously, because of security reasons, but we can do little bits with permission of the client, because in most cases he's going to be ripping things out, but we still need to know what he's ripping out, so they can make decisions. So it all makes sense to people. Yeah.
I'm going to just cover something shortly on the asset types, because that's an important area. But I'd like to just step back because we've been doing a lot of talking, Barry. Are there any questions that people have?
I just put one in the chat. If data centers are seldom occupied, could the oxygen levels be reduced to below 15% when the data center is unoccupied, as this would help to prevent fire?
That's a really good point. Yeah. I don't know the answer to that, but we can certainly raise that with
sorry, George, that then implies a level of fabric cohesion. You'd have to make sure that the fabric wasn't leaking. So but you know, that brings into question lots of other things.
Just something that I've got here is, it's like lithium batteries, is that if there's no oxygen, that's one issue, but some of those things don't require oxygen to carry on burning. The other part is sometimes how do you get oxygen back in there unless there's an oxygen headset for the emergency crew to run in, because it would take time for the oxygen levels to be raised so people can be functionally operating in that area. So I think sometimes there's a bit of pragmatic part behind that, Bernard, that it's a good idea, but maybe there's other reasons that might mitigate against it.
One of the things I was surprised about when I was walking around is the huge fire suppression systems that are built in around this using halogen and whatever, you know, there's tanks and tanks of everything, and they're paranoid about setting these things off. So there's fire is not so much an issue because the fire suppression systems are just instantaneous. These halogen, and because there's banks of tanks out there. So it's more, I think the main talking to the guys and the maintenance engineers, the main drive for them is reducing electricity consumption, because this is just a huge drive, and of course the cost of electricity in this is phenomenal. So I mean, I'm sure there are lots of interesting design elements to it, but and things are changing. You know, do you put everything in a hermetically sealed room and not touch it? There's all sorts of things that have changed, and one of the issues here is this is a 38-year-old building. Some of the maintenance people have been there for all 38 years, but they're now having to migrate and change to a completely different set of IT paraphernalia and apparatus and equipment. But most of it is designed about reducing the energy footprint of it. And I think that's going to be an interesting thing, because as well as doing that, you know, this building was designed in 38 years ago. It's a beautiful building, but is it suitable for purpose for energy consumption? And that's another decision about the fabric of the building, not just about the kit that's going in it, that they're going to have, the new owners are going to have to take into account. So it's right. I mean, it's a great story and project to look at. How do you repurpose brownfield buildings? This isn't an old Victorian mill you're changing into apartments. Okay, this is going to be a really important, huge consumer of electricity in the Calder Valley.
Barry,
Yeah,
just a question. I made a note there that, are these buildings not a potential source of energy for district heating, cooling systems?
Definitely. That's already absolutely on the radar. And in fact, actually, the operator that we're working for is actually doing this in cities. So what they're doing is they're identifying sites where they can bring data centers close to the user. It's called edge computing. So it's to bring together the access to the internet much closer to the operators. And in fact, they've also been looking at we've introduced them to a couple of residential landlords about putting a data center in a container or small unit on the roof that can then service a big development. Because as people are using, well, certainly more gaming, but the other thing is driverless cars, but certainly gaming, you need a very fast reaction. So yes, Pierre, that's an important area. Just to pick up on what Barry was saying there, the interesting thing, obviously, what they're doing, and they have been doing, Lloyds have been upgrading the facility over that 38 years. So there's a lot been going on, and there's a lot of new stuff, relatively new stuff gone in. For example, in the data halls, data centers used to use Halon, and in fact, some are still got Halon. But my understanding, I don't know, Kevin, if you're an engineer, but you might be able to say Halon apparently that's being replaced by other gases that are suppressants, which can do a similar job, but they're not as dangerous. Yeah, so that's something that's already been done there, and you know it's very interesting how that's all evolving.
Yeah, I think if they're using carbon dioxide for some of it, I think because all sorts of warning signs. If the alarm goes off, run away quick.
I think it might be Inogen that they're using. Yeah. So they've. It's interesting. Mighty are actually doing the maintenance, and they've been there for, as I say, they were. I think they were probably tupied over. Some of them were tupied over from Lloyd's in the day, as it were. So, yeah, it's an interesting one. So, if you're interested in getting involved in it, we may well need to get some sort of security clearance for people that are actually going to actively be involved. And part of the challenge is how do we do this in such a way that the information is protected. I mean, the beauty of the way in which we do this with ActivePlan is that those 360s will be in ActivePlan. There won't be just on a an open website or anything like that, obviously, and we control who can access what and who can see what, so that the client will have the opportunity to switch on or off levels of detail for different people. The other thing
I think the other thing I was just sorry to George. I think the thing that I find particularly fascinating about this is coming up with the taxonomy for classification, because there's different buildings have different taxonomies and different ways of tagging things. Obviously, you've got the asset information, but you also have local taxonomies which are suitable as well. And I think one of the things I'm particularly interested in is how do we develop that process and use this as a template for guidance. So you can have, when we're talking about taxonomies and classification, obviously you have things to do with planned different assets, but then there's a local taxonomy as well, which is specific room numbers. Who's responsible for that piece of plant? Which department runs it? Now that's going to vary for every operation and operator, but there is going to be a standard taxonomy, which is to do with what is a typical kit that you get. So we can use that for tagging, but then there's also this local taxonomy as well, which will make things run alongside the basic one, and that's really what for me personally, I have to do this quite a lot. So doing this on this and documenting how we do that is going to be important to people when they're coming to do it themselves. This is like this is the method we use. Now you know these are the things we did wrong. Okay, if you don't start off with a local taxonomy, there's no point having a taxonomy or a classification system on the plant, because it's going to be meaningless. Does that make sense? So that's one of the things I particularly want to try and do on this and share in this particular project, because it's not the worst case scenario, but it's a typical scenario of what we're having to do when you've got an asset transferring ownership, or you're doing remedial work or improving the performance, whether that's energy consumption or efficiency, PC ratings, all those sort of things. So it's about developing two taxonomies. I think you can probably see what I mean. You know, it's about, well, that's great, but which department's responsible for that?
Barry, if I can come in there, something that I saw on other projects that I had in the Middle East was that the operations, maintenance, and an emergency response, you talk about the local taxonomy, was in fact things were numbered in a way that the sequence of events, so you close down this, you shut down that, you shut down that. And that's then built in basically not just where the plant is, because it might be on different sides, but it's that sequence.
Well, essentially what we're doing here is we're moving from BIM into the whole realm of an interactive digital twin. This idea of then having what you're talking about, Pierre, is exactly what a digital twin is, which is asking the what if questions. Okay, a digital twin is about an interactive 3D model, or, well, it doesn't have to be a 3D model, it's a simulation of events. And really what it's about is, well, if we did this, what would happen? If this happens, what should we do to react to it? And this moves in, but you can't do a digital twin without an asset register. Okay,
it's a bit like playing war games, isn't it?
Exactly, and
you need to know where all your assets are, where they're deployed, and then start running the scenario and react to it as it goes.
Yeah, I mean, just as a simple story, I was helping somebody with the digital twin of a mine in Australia a year before last, and the problem they had was mines are not the critical thing for mines is conveyors. If the conveyor breaks down, the mine can't produce. And what they had is a guy who was about 60 years old who'd been doing the surveyors, who'd been doing this for ages and ages. But because of COVID, he was prevented from coming to work. But he was the guy who knew the sound. He knew where to hit that motor with the right hammer to stop the noise. Essentially, that's it. But he was. So what we did with him is we'd use this knowledge-based 360 knowledge. It's a 360 knowledge map. So if someone heard that noise, he got alerted and he would listen to it and then said, that's fine, don't worry about it, or hit it with the 14-pound hammer on this bit. It was that basic.
It's funny you should mention about noise, because people are actually putting listeners into plant room
Yeah.
to then look for anomalies. It's a bit like a doctor and a stethoscope.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, the same
Well,
sort,
it's
or
a whole
ECG
science.
or whatever.
Vibration analysis
Yeah.
is what
But
is.
what was
is
interesting when I was looking at that 360 though, Barry, which is all the color coding. So
Yeah.
there's a standard for pipes and things like that. So a gas main is always a sort of pale green. And then if you look in hospitals, the different gases, they've all got wraps around them. And if you look in any plant room, and I noticed that the power sockets in the overhead trunking, there was blue, there were blue and there were red, which obviously to me sort of indicated possibly one's a power and one's data, because it looked like from looking at all the vents that were in the ceiling and in the floor. Because if you look, it was a raised floor and there were vents in the floor. Is that air is being pumped, is being moved around, so it's sort of like taking the air rather than individual units having their own cooling systems and things like that. But those are sort of the other thing that was interesting, that George was mentioning, is that when data centers first started, they were servicing anything. You had banks using the same data center that somebody who was running their hobby website off. But now it looks like, from what George is saying, is that some of them are actually specializing. So they're saying, we will put this, for instance, on this backbone. It's going to cost us more, but we're only going to focus on trading, on the share price trading, because we need that fast connection. We need that instantaneous. And in fact, there is a thing about quantum computing being used for trading as well, which is a bit mind-boggling, but that's a different thing. But it's the evolution of the data centers. So we're always in a sort of process of catch-up. But the underlying essence of the way that they're structured will always be similar, and the technology will move, but their then emphasis will sometimes be on different levels and their different criticality aspects as well.
Yeah, and Anna's raised an interesting point about the people not being ready to use digital twins as well, and that's interesting, and I agree. But the really interesting thing is that companies like EDF, for years and years and years, they refused to use cloud-based software. And then suddenly they actually use software now for all their maintenance from Siemens, PML, which is a cloud-based solution. And what they found out was that exactly by putting things in the cloud, it's a lot more security, it's safer than having one server, which can be targeted by ne'er-do-wells. By disseminating the information into the cloud, it's actually safer than having all your information in one server. But you're absolutely right that security people, I mean, I've done some work in one of the category 3 centers, which is used by the police and the Home Office. You can't get in there. I mean, unless you've slept with the manager, I don't know how you get in there. You just can't get in there to do anything. But at the same time, if you've got a secure 360 environment you can share that with over your own, then that means that you at least can look at things in a limited way. You're not going to see the security cameras. You're not going to see where the cables come in. Because the major security issue for data centers is, where do the BT cables come into the building? Yeah, and sometimes they've got, I know data centers where they've got 3 different dummy ones, which aren't working. And one of them is actually bringing stuff in, because the data centers lives or breathes by the cables that are coming in, they're taking the data in and the data out. So you're absolutely right. It's something that we are moving towards. The idea of a digital twin might be used in the design phase. It might be used later on when they're saying, well, if we put this new rack in, how's that going to impact our energy consumption? If we put a new stuff, and it's this what if question. What if we did something? That's what a digital twin is really about. And I figured out it's not about a pretty picture. It's not about anything. It's about what if, and also managing knowledge, this tacit knowledge that any building has. You know, you've got guys who've been there for 38 years and they know every system. they're probably as valuable as the building itself in many ways, and harnessing that using asset information and attaching knowledge, and this tacit knowledge or stories or videos is a video of how you take that filter and replace it. We're not just talking, asset information isn't just about a point and a tag, it's what you do with that information. And I think that's one of the interesting things about where this journey is going.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so let's just talk about what the next steps are, because we've shown the 360s, but there's some plumbing to be done as well. So what we're looking for is people that have got some interest and experience of getting involved in this. So if I can just show my screen. We've got an asset list from them, which I'll show you in a second. But one of the challenges is the fact that a lot of this information that comes in isn't connected. So typically we've got the O&M manuals, for example, which I don't think actually we've seen those in a digital format yet, have we, Barry? I think they've said that they've been scanned. But let's say on a typical project, we've got CAD data, we've got we might, if it's a new building, we might have COBie, but even if not, you know, that's a good basis on which to work. And then we've got the 360 photos, which Barry was talking about there. And one of the challenges is that they're not connected. So that's really where what we've been doing within ActivePlan, we've been bringing these together so that we can then integrate these things. So I'm showing this really as this is how we're actually going to run this project, and Watney Market that we showed yesterday. And the important thing about it is that we're not reliant on the information that comes in from BIM models. Now, thankfully, that's the case here because obviously there isn't a BIM model. So we can take drawings, schedules, and then importantly, we can then use the 360s to actually operate it, to fill in the gaps, as it were. But it's also absolutely critical that we do that using a proper database of information. So what we're doing is we're using Uniclass, NRM, and the other classification systems. But these are the standards that we're trying to work around. These are government standards, down to the level of detail of saying what each attribute needs to be. So a property, how spaces are referenced, and we can put all of that into the asset information management databases, which we're now able to glue things together. So I see that we've got some colleagues from SFG20 on, which is a tremendous resource for tying together the maintenance requirements. But what's absolutely critical from the asset management point of view is that the data itself is structured in the right way so that the location of assets and systems is actually consistent. So this is the way we're supporting, this is the way Sodexo are doing it, where they're using the 360s as a way of capturing information about existing buildings. And then they've got teams anywhere really who are experts. And this is what we'd be hoping that you might be able to do if you've got the right expertise. You know, maybe certainly Bernard's an engineer, maybe you could help with that. And what that does, it creates intelligent asset data, which then is related to the 360s. So the information that Barry was showing you earlier, that plant room, we could have experts actually going through tagging those assets. And I'll show you in a minute the asset list that we've been given. And therefore, that means that you've got a record of machine readable data, which can then also be connected back into SFG20. So you've got the maintenance requirements actually tied into the asset information, so that you've got that proper workflow. And the principle there is we need to be able to make the 360 photographs smart, so that they are machine addressable. So what we're doing here, we've got the 360 photo, we then connect it with the asset library, what I've just been showing you. And therefore, we've then got more findable information, and it can then be related back to systems. So we've got a range of different data sets then, and the O&M information, for example, product libraries, etc., which are all tied back to the asset library. And the beauty of that is that in many cases, you only need to do this once, and then it then can be connected back into information that's maybe being collected from a construction perspective using a vast range of new platforms. But you can then use that for asset capture, that's the main thing that we're going to be doing on this project. But there's also validating. Validating is where you're actually comparing it with a library of asset information that you've actually, is in that space. Condition assessment. We're just about to start a project where the 360s are going to be used by a condition survey company, to avoid them having to send their experts to site. And this particular project's got about 700 sites, so it's going to be a massive saving for them, because it's 6 to 8 times faster. That's what we've discovered, than sending people to site. As Barry was saying earlier, it means that the procurement can be more accurate, because it means that whoever's going to be maintaining those plant rooms have got a much better idea of all the assets that they are going to be maintaining, and also to be able to tie that back to product libraries for replacement. We're also looking at this from a safety perspective, making sure that disabled access works. So there's a whole fantastic range of things that those 360 photos that Barry was showing can actually benefit from. So I'll just show you this is the asset list that we've been given, which I think is probably an output from Maximo. So we've got here the basics there, but the challenge is that we've got 2,237 asset types and assets. Now, I'm saying that in a considered way, because in fact it's fewer than that, but there's still a lot of asset types there that could be rationalized back. And this is really quite important, because you need to be able to map, for example, SFG20 to a type of asset, which is then related to the individual instances of that asset. We've also got all the spacers, but again, there's a lot of different spacers, and some of them aren't probably that well defined. So there's some cleaning up to be done here. But the point is, when we end up with an asset list that reflects what's in a particular area, so for example, in the battery room, that would then the spreadsheets. It's not done anything with that, has it? Oh, sorry. Yeah, so boiler room, ground floor. So if we know these are the assets that are supposed to be in that room there, we can use the 360s to basically tag those assets and which one is boiler 1, 2, and 3. Yeah. So, and it may well be that it needs to be far more granular than that. But that's something that can then be added progressively. So if you're interested in getting involved in the asset tagging side of things, even if it's just to learn or experiment, please let us know. Maybe put something in the chat to say interested in learning about tagging. I think we're going to also to be having some subject matter experts who are M&E specialists. I was talking to a company, a specialist last week, and he's getting involved with power generation or power distribution, rather, power distribution. And this has got some power distribution facilities as well. So if you're interested in getting involved in that, then put your name in the chat, or not the name. Sorry, we know who you are. Barry, I'll hand back onto you.
Oh, okay. All right. Basically, I think that what I'm fascinated about is this idea of using visual documentation to help show the context of things. I don't know if anybody's interested at all, but I'll put the link in the chat. But next Monday, Tuesday, I'm running a 360 boot camp, which shows you how to capture these things as well. I'll just put it in the chat, but I'm going to give access to all the members recording of this anyway, because I think it's really important that people understand what's involved and what we can do later on. But for us, it's a really interesting project to work on, especially if we can get collaboration from and come up with best practice. We're doing this as to try and improve the whole industry as much as anything else, because if we can use this and then use this as a tool to educate our clients, because our clients don't know what we can do. They don't know what they don't know. And the whole point about this is an asset information is quite often you don't know what you don't know about your asset. So, I mean, that's really just, that's all I wanted to say, George. It's just, it's just a really exciting group of people who can contribute, and we'll try our best to share the information and the best practices, and also the things we did wrong, because quite often it's the stuff we get wrong that you learn most from. So I will be, as we go through this, we've got a couple of projects. So we've got, if you were on the call yesterday, we were talking about Watney Market and the relationship to housing and things like this. And this is to do with manufacturing, asset information, but plant rooms in general, and every building you can think of, whether it's a school boiler room or the gas pump for a hospital. Mechanical engineering is such an intrinsic part of the operation of this building. It's not just about designing a lovely looking building that's cost effective and energy. It's about how does this work? And asset management is probably the most important part that we often miss in the design. The handover, how is it going to work?
Yeah, definitely. So part of the issue with this is that within the data center, we've got a whole range of disciplines that we can bring together. And the, part of that is what's important to the data center operator, as opposed to the data center, the people that have got servers in there, because the data center operator, their major interest isn't in the air conditioning, which surprised me. It's the power, because without the power, they're dead. And that was quite important for me to understand. I mean, clearly for their and also it depends on how the data centers, whether it's a co-located data center or dedicated or whatever. The other thing I would say, just to build on what Barry was saying there, is that we've got a session later on schools, which we're trying to look at how we can make schools more effective from an asset management perspective. But we've also got a healthcare estate, So one of our members has brought their healthcare estate to the group, and we're starting that. There's going to be some work on community hospitals and things like that. So that's going to be operating hopefully over the next week or so. So if you're I think the key thing here isn't what type of building it is. It's what are the assets and how the systems work. And I think if we can build the relationship between asset types, assets, and systems, that is absolutely critical, because we can gain that knowledge and then make that across all of the projects. And that's clearly what SFG20 are doing. And I think we need to be working together to start thinking in that way, because all too often the information that comes out of BIM models isn't that it's not at an asset type level, it's individual assets. And people think that's fantastic. It's not fantastic if you've got 20,000 assets coming from a building and you've got no classification, you've got no categorization, because it's unmanageable from an individual asset type perspective. And also systems. We need to have better connections between assets and systems, in particular from an M&E perspective. So if you're interested in schools, or you could join us later. If you're interested in healthcare, put healthcare in the chat. We can involve you in that one as well. If you like what you've seen today and this level of collaboration, please tell everybody else that you're working with to get in touch with Richard, and you can then join, because what we need to do is grow the exposure of this. Any other observations before we close?
Just where's the bacon butties, George? I'm waiting. We have these breakfast meetings. We need some sort of sustenance. So it's Friday, bacon butty day.
So do people find it's been useful? I mean, Mo, you're right in the centre of my screen at the moment. So has it been useful this morning?
Yeah, I think the idea of everyone collaborating together so that we do these things is like really, really good, to be honest, because then we can stop duplicating that. And I didn't actually realize, because I'm joining the range of the sessions. So I joined yesterday, and I'll be joining the schools one later. I think that what's great is that we have the range of project typologies, I think then taking it down to the asset level will be really interesting. So it's just been really, really good to hear about everything that's happening and like the planned initiatives.
Yeah, if anybody knows of projects that you could bring to the table, then please do so, because I think the more, as Mo's saying there, the variety of projects makes a big difference. Margaret, you've got your hand up.
I have. I'm absolutely enjoying this session. The inputs coming in from the various. Forgive me, I'm not on screen. I'm going to turn this on off. But just to say, I've put something in the chat. I don't know if you saw it, George.
No.
But, yeah, in terms of research projects, in terms of retrofit, and if there's anyone that can help us, they only have a set timeline with the funding that they've got from Europe in UCL. So if anyone can help with that repurposing project, utilizing an AI tool to reduce carbon and so on and so forth. But the main thing is the experiences that Barry's just been raising in terms of somebody had said about somebody with a hammer that hit the pipe at the right place. That happens. It's what happens. And of course, the joining of the dots. It's no use just having a BIM model and pretty pictures. It's got to work for us. It's got to be used, which is, as I said yesterday or the day before, that we're doing in Dagenham on our Pearl project, which is a net zero building. But the main thing is, all that, I can see, Tim, that you were raising there, all that you were saying there, Pierre, all that you were saying, it is so important. It's not just about buildings. Buildings have kit in them which are useful for the life of the building, for the running of the building. And we have a 60-strong DLO in UCL. I mean, you all work with the DLOs and term contractors, and they need this information. They really need it from day one. So this is so helpful. This discussion. Forgive me for talking too much, but this is so useful. I'm a health and safety professional, civil engineer by background, but what we do with the information is vital. And going forward with the golden thread, that's exactly what we need to be doing for non-HRBs as well as HRBs. It's not just about HRBs.
I think it's really, I was talking to a guy in Canada late last night and trying to explain what this whole thing was. And the metaphor I use is you can have all this information and it's like having a beautiful atlas on your coffee table. But it's only useful if you've got an index at the back so you can find it. And that is really what we're trying to do, is make things findable. So the golden thread is findability. That's the core. That's the core of everything. And that's what we're trying to do, is this word findability should run like the name through a stick of rock in everything we do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just about getting a CDE, a box, an empty box. Where's the intelligence? Where's the intelligent decisioning that goes with it? Thank you.
I don't know many facility managers who actually know what COBie is. No. I don't know. We talk in this language, and a lot of the things we've got to do is try and demystify a lot of what we do and have the story. That you're going to remember the story about the man hitting with a hammer.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, you're not going to remember the story about the Excel spreadsheet, and bless you, George, not an asset list. That's not what you're going to tell your boss. You're going to tell people the story about the man hitting something with a hammer, and that's part of the digital twin.
I think the other thing that really brings it home to me in that complex plant room that Barry was showing earlier is that no matter what level of detail the client is willing to pay for in the BIM model, you're never going to get that. It's never going to replace the 360 photo, because the 360 photo will always have more information than is in the BIM model. Now, that doesn't mean the BIM model isn't important, because it definitely is. If there is a BIM model, then that's great. But the important thing is that the 360 is having a level of detail that it would be literally impractical. Let's say, nothing's impossible, but it would be impractical to go to that level of that level of detail. So that's the beauty of the 360s, and the thing that we're doing in being able to add data to the database through the database to the 360 makes a huge difference, and that's a game changer that we're going to be covering this afternoon. We're doing one on digital asset capture, or the as-built as digital asset capture. And what we're also doing is we're making it so that we can have a schematic, which I think is also going to be important to this data center project, Barry, that we can have an interactive schematic, which is connecting. The schematic will connect back to the 360, can connect back to the asset data, and also, if there is any BIM model, back to that as well. So that type of coordination is, and all the documentation, as you said earlier, Barry, being able to navigate the O&M manual through the 360, because that's a much easier way of getting to stuff. I'll shut up now.
Yeah, and just so that if you want an easy way to remember a schematic, that's your London tube map. That's
Yes.
what it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Can anybody's ever tried to go around London without a tube map? It's
Yeah.
impossible.
Good. Okay. Richard,
Off
do you
my
want to
bacon
close
potty
it
now.
Excellent,
Started,
excellent.
yeah.
I've been very patient, haven't I, sitting here waiting for you.
Yeah.
All right, great. Another great meeting. We're just rolling them in, aren't we? We've got 3 more this afternoon. If you're free and you want to come along, just put that education, health, and digital asset
Golden thread.
capture in the chat, and we'll get you an invitation. Failing
No,
that,
no,
we'll
no.
see you all.
Richard, no. Sorry, the healthcare one isn't today. So if
Oh,
you put
I
your
thought
name
you
in,
say sorry.
yeah,
Sorry.
the healthcare one, if you put name in the chat, we're just mobilizing that. So
Beg your
I think
pardon.
that'll be in a week or two's time. But if you're interested in that, put your name in the chat. But as far as today is concerned, we've got the schools one, which
Yeah.
I think if you're interested in schools, that one is at 12:30. We then at 2 o'clock, we've got the as-built using digital asset capture.
Yeah.
And then at
Golden Thread Task Force. That was the other
3:30, Golden Thread Task Force, which
one. That's the one.
we've got loads of people coming to that
Brilliant.
one. So,
Yeah, that's a biggie. That's going to be a biggie. We're going to finish these sessions with a bang, I think, with that one. Okay, guys. Great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Brilliant.
See you soon.
Thank you so much. Brilliant. Cheers.